What is up, boys? Welcome back to the YouTube. About 1 year ago, I made a video talking about my favorite house rules in DnD 5e. I think I only put about 5 of them in there, but since then, through another year's worth of DMing, I have scoured the internet, going through every other content creator or player's house rules themselves, and I have compiled a list of my favorite house rules going into the 2021 year that I use in my games. For those of you who've been following the channel for a while, you may recognize some of these from the previous video. Some of these will be from other content creators. Some of these will be my own creation. But without any further delay, let's get started. Starting off with character creation. Now, the way I rule character creation is any player who comes into my games can use all official material. If it has been printed in a book, it is allowed, plus all Unearthed Arcana. It is called playtest content for a reason. I'm gonna playtest it. As for Homebrew, that's a bit of a different story. For the most part, I don't allow any Homebrew from my players, as I already use a lot of Homebrew in my own games via my own monster manual that you know about, or other monster manuals or other systems that are introduced into my game that are balanced around the existing content in 5e. So if I introduced other content outside of 5e, that could create some problems. So for the most part, I just not allow any sort of Homebrew. And everyone seems to have been okay with that so far. Next up is a rule that I have seen used in Critical Role when rolling for HP. When you roll for HP, you can ignore any ones you roll on your dice. If you roll another one, you just keep re-rolling until you get something that is not a 1, or you can take the safe number. It creates a lot of feels bad moments when people roll 1s on their dice. Also, it encourages people to roll for their HP since they have a higher chance at not rolling poorly. But if they still wish to not do that, they can still have the option of taking the safe number. Moving forward with that, we also have what I like to refer to as easy encumbrance. Now, Encumbrance in 5th edition, as stated by others, was meant as a sort of ease of access for pen and paper D&D. I still play with a lot of new players who don't really understand the weight encumbrances. Some people run variant encumbrance. I just sort of home rule it as, if you're not carrying like a giant boulder 3 times your size, you can probably just carry it on you. Like, for example, if people find a chest full of gold, I just give them the gold. I don't make them like try to figure out a way to carry it out or something like that. Within reason. Again, it's on a case-by-case basis, but for the most part, I'm very lax on how many things my players can carry. It's just a lot less things to worry about when they're focused on role play and combat. Next rule I have, no evil characters. If you murder Hobo in my game, we're gonna have a problem, both in-game and out of game. Your actions have consequences. Play a good character. At the very worst, play a chaotic neutral character. You can even be the edgy chaotic neutral rogue if you want, but absolutely no evil characters, no murder hoboing, full stop. Moving on, intelligence bonuses. I stole this from XP to level 3. I really like the concept of not having your intelligence just be a dump stat, because it's always a dump stat. So I like the idea of having each bonus you have in intelligence, either +1, +2, +3, giving you an additional skill proficiency, tool proficiency, or a language. In the Into the Fire campaign that I'm now running on Twitch, I told this rule to the players, and one of the players who was going to make intelligence their dump stat decided to not do that, to give them more proficiencies with musical instruments, which I think is really creative, and I'm really glad I introduced this rule. Moving on, we have Attunement, another slight steal from XP to level 3. However, I changed one of the rules. It will take 1 action to attune to a magic item. I really think that when players get new magic items, they should be able to just use them. Like if they beat the dragon and now they have to escape the dungeon, I really want them to be able to use that awesome sword they just got immediately to try to, you know, give them a little boost in combat. But for unattuning to an item, it will take a full short rest, which is, I believe, the normal unattuned timer. I think attuning should be definitely scaled back to that 1 action, but the unattuned time, it's fine. Doesn't really matter regardless. After that, we have a rule that I have seen one of my friends use in their DMing games, and a lot of other people do this as well, but the bloodied condition, where if a monster, which is mostly like a big boss monster, goes under half HP, you let the players know that they are now considered bloodied. It was a condition in previous editions of the game, and there are some monsters which I think, like Knowles, had a sort of interaction with the bloodied mechanic, I think that was scrapped in 5th edition for the most part. But having your players get to know the stages of a boss fight is a really good thing to give them. I love seeing the players' faces light up when they land that critical blow and suddenly the boss is now like noticeably wounded. They are now bloodied. And also, I also run this bloodied condition as a slight spoiler for a future monster manual printing I'm going to be doing in the future. Stay tuned for that. Next up, we have Potion HP Recovery, which involves the drinking of health potions. Now, the way I've seen I'm sort of stealing this from the Dungeon Dudes a little bit, but it is modified in that if a player drinks a potion as an action, they will get the full amount of hit points they could possibly get from the potion. So a normal healing potion is 2d4 plus 2. So if they drink that potion as an action, it will always give them 10 hit points. But they can also choose to drink it as a bonus action, not consuming their entire action, but only their bonus, in which case they will then have to roll for their HP bonus. It's kind of a way of signifying like doing it hastily, but you could also make an argument that doesn't really matter when you're drinking. It's the potency of the liquid is either good or not. So I just like to have it rolled like this because it makes combat take faster, but it also allows a sort of a gambling player agency. They can either choose to do something quicker, like drink a health potion, and also do an action in combat, but then they're sacrificing a potential lot of HP from their healing potion. So it's really good for player agency. I like this rule overall. Next up, we have Stealth. Now, Stealth is overly complicated rules as written. The wall of text for Stealth is just a bit too much. So the way I like to rule Stealth is players can just go through a dungeon as they normally would, but at the moment of their potential discovery where an enemy is about to turn to see them, I will have whoever is leading the party roll their stealth check. Whoever's leading the party, which means that if it's your tank with plate armor, he's going to have disadvantage. So that's another thing to consider when you're having your party organization when going through a dungeon. You can't just have the party tank go through it, have you all roll stealth, and you're good to go. So whenever the player in front is going to get seen, or I guess whenever any player is about to get seen, I have them roll a stealth, I have the enemy roll a perception check, and play it like that. It is a super simple way to run stealth in 5th edition. Even more simple than they tried to make it. Didn't really work very well. But that is how I rule that roll. So, moving on, we have maximized criticals. Now, I don't know about you, but as a player myself, and when my players roll crits, it is such feels bad man moment when they just roll the crit, and then on their 1d12 great axe, they just roll that one. Now, granted, there are feats to get around this, like Great Weapon Master, etc., Great Weapon Fighting, one of the two, I don't remember, but I'd rather have it to be where a critical hit will always deal, at the very least, the maximum damage on the damage dice. So if you have a great axe and you roll a critical hit, you would roll damage as normal on your 1d12, but you would also add the full 12 possible damage you could get on top of that, and then add your modifiers. This was an idea from the Dungeon Dudes. Again, I really liked this idea because it makes criticals feel worthy, but this also applies to your enemies. So if a goblin's going to shoot you with an arrow, they're going to roll that full 6 on the longbow or the 6 on the short bow, and then their damage, and then their modifiers. So it's a really good high risk, high reward play, which is one of my favorite things in D&D 5e. Moving on, we have flanking. Now, there are so many different ways to rule flanking. The way I rule flanking, and I've changed this over the course of my DMing career, but the way I figured it out to do is just have it be 180 degree spread. One person stands at one side of a monster, the other person stands on the other 180 degrees. There's no wiggle room there. If you have that actual flanking advantage, you get your advantage on your attack. Doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Combat already takes too long. We're leaving it at that. It only gives up to 4 people possibly advantage. You can't just dogpile a party of 7 around one character and gain advantage on all of them. You'd have to have it be the exact 180 degrees or you get nothing. Moving on, lingering injuries. Now, I learned about this rule also from XP to level 3, and I didn't like it at first because at early levels, characters can take a lot of damage versus other enemies that don't take as much damage. For example, a player character who gets hit with a critical hit from a goblin spear and has to take a lingering injury or a system shock in the DMG is going to suffer a lot more than if they dealt half damage to that one goblin out of the 50 they have to fight. However, I have come to love this rule. There are 2 specific tables that I rolled lingering injuries from. I will leave them down in the description below. But basically the way it works is if a character takes half their maximum HP and goes down, they get slapped with a lingering injury. It can be anything from having your fingers cut off, which gives you disadvantage on attack rolls, or you can't cast if you have somatic components with that hand, or you can just not be able to take actions unless you succeed on a concentration saving throw each time you want to take an action, or a constitution saving throw whenever you want to take an action. So I think that lingering injuries add a strong amount of grit to the game, and I've been having a really fun time with these. I have had to tune down the tables that I've been pulling from, as they are very mean, and I feel like I'm already mean enough to my players. Next up, we have the minion rules, a rule set from the 4th edition rulebook that has made its way into many a game in 5th edition. The way this works is that you have your one boss monster followed by a bunch of smaller monsters laid out around them. You know, they're minions, but you chop all of their HP down into 1. So any point of damage they get will automatically kill them. Some people rule this as if they succeed on saving throws, they don't take any damage. I would still let them take the damage. I think that a player casting a spell that requires a save and not dealing any damage would feel so bad to the player. I would just allow them to kill them regardless. If they're going to expend an entire spell slot like a Dissonant Whispers on a minion monster, it should just kill it. That's my opinion. Any point of damage that any minion monster takes kills them outright, but you put in plenty of them to add the threat of being overwhelmed, so the players will have to make the choice of whether they want to focus fire on the boss monster or take out all the minions, but have it take a little bit longer. Maybe they get hit a lot more by the boss monster or the minions. It's another party choice that they can make, but that is how I specifically run minions in D&D 5e. Moving on, Secret Death Saves. Jacob, this rule sucks. I really liked this rule when you put it into your 21 homebrew rules that you used for 5e, but man, my players hate it. They do not like the agency being ripped away from them when I just roll behind the screen and they don't get to know anything. I really thought that I kept this rule for several sessions thinking that they would come around on this. They never did. So what I did is I modified this rule for Secret Death Saves because I still think that players shouldn't get to know. I agree with you that players shouldn't get to know how close you are to death unless they have like true sight or something. But the way I roll Secret Death Saves is I have the player roll their death saving throw, direct message me what it was. They cannot tell the other players what their roll was. They have to only message it to me so I know. This still keeps the level of urgency of having the players not know how close to the brink of death you are as a downed player, but it also keeps the player agency of getting to roll their own death saves. This is a win-win for everybody. Works out very well. Next up, help action requiring proficiency in a skill. Stole this from XP to level 3 again. I think that it really wouldn't make sense if you're trying to like boost a character onto a roof to give them advantage on their athletics check. If you're not good in athletics, you shouldn't be able to give them advantage. Doesn't really make sense. Next up is a rule that I came up with myself over about a year ago, and I've been running with it ever since, regarding the different types of skill checks. Any physical skill checks take an action. So any checks that require you to use your strength or your dexterity, so your acrobatics, your athletics, your stealth, all take an action. Any mental skill checks, anything that uses intelligence, wisdom, or charisma, takes a bonus action. This is really useful in combat when characters are trying to make perception checks to like find weaknesses in a monster or find other monsters that could be hidden away without wasting their entire turn. Again, the entire point of this is to speed up combat so you can make your perception check and then make your attack. Or you can try to make your persuasion check to get them to not attack you, but you don't know if it succeeded or not. So then you have to make that decision with your action whether or not you want to still attack them. So it really works out to give the players more choices and to give them much more agency in combat. Moving on, we have the final rule that I have concluded in my list of 2021 house rules, and that is talking as a free action lasts only 6 seconds. Free actions in combat exist, talking is included in one of them, but because your turn only lasts 6 seconds, if you decide to talk for any longer than 6 seconds, it must be completely disregarded by the player you just decided to talk to. Basically, you are not allowed to read the Emancipation Proclamation during your turn in combat. However, my bard player likes to make a lot of shitty one-liners during combat, so this is just for him. But boys, that is my list of 2021 house rules that I include in my Dungeons & Dragons games that I think are just excellent. If you like any of these rules or dislike any of these rules, leave your comments down below, and also leave any house rules you specifically use so I can steal them for my own games. But I hope you guys enjoyed this video nonetheless. If you did, be sure to leave it a like, subscribe, comment, do all the things all the YouTubers like to tell you to do. And until next time, guys, have fun, stay safe, and as always, happy gaming.